How is my little one today?
He's very active, Uncle. I felt him move just now.
The old man's palm was warm and dry against her belly, pressing in slow circles, the way one might test a ripe melon for sweetness. "How is my grandchild doing today, eh?" he asked, chuckling low in his throat, his eyes fixed somewhere past her, as though he were listening for an answer only he could hear. Ngozi went still. Something in the touch did not feel like a grandfather's touch. It felt searching, the way a thief's hand searches a pocket before the owner notices. She stepped back so quickly that his hand fell away and hung in the air a moment before he lowered it. "Uncle, please," she said, her voice sharper than she meant it. "Don't touch my stomach again, ever." Then when he only smiled and made to reach for her again, something in her snapped loose. "Nah. Ah, must I always tell you this? Keep your hands off my body. This is my baby, not yours to be feeling anyhow." The room went quiet. Shidi came hurrying in from the veranda at the sound of her raised voice, took in the scene, his wife trembling, his uncle's hands still half lifted, the old man's face arranged into wounded innocence, and did what a nephew raised on respect does without thinking. "Ngozi, calm down now," he said, taking her arm, though his eyes were on his uncle, apologetic. "This is Uncle Azobia. You know I trust him with my life. There's no need for all this." "Shidi, not now." His voice left no room. "We'll talk later." The old man only smiled, a slow, wicked curling of the mouth that did not reach his eyes, and patted Shidi's shoulder. It's fine," he said gently. "Young wives are protective. That is not a bad thing. No quarrel between husband and wife over an old man. I will not have that on my head." And with that, he gathered his walking stick and let himself out, unhurried, humming something under his breath that neither of them recognized as a tune. He did not go far. 2 compounds down, in the small room he kept for himself at the back of his own house, he shut the door, drew the curtain, and knelt before a low wooden stool on which sat a calabash wrapped in red cloth, waiting, as it always waited for him. "My own daughter has not given birth in her husband's house in 4 years, he muttered, untying the cloth with fingers that did not shake, despite his age. 4 years. While everybody's wife is carrying Big Belly up and down, laughing, and my Adaezi sits there with empty hands and empty womb, and her husband's family is already searching for a second wife for him. No." He struck a match, lit a small flame beneath the calabash, and began to speak words in a dialect older than the town itself, his voice dropping into a register that did not belong to the mild-mannered uncle who visited nephews and admired unborn grandchildren. "If my daughter's womb will not open, then no womb in this family will open before hers. This child, into the calabash it goes. It will not see this world. Let it live in here instead, if it wants to live at all." He laughed then, a short, satisfied sound, and sealed the calabash with wax, and slid it back beneath the stool, as though he had done nothing more than put away a pot of soup. That night, in his own bedroom, Shidi was still turning the afternoon over in his mind, and what came out of the turning was not sympathy for his wife, but irritation. "You embarrassed me today," he said, not looking at her, folding his clothes with more force than folding required. "The man who has known me since I was in my mother's womb, and you shouted him like he is a stranger trying to snatch your purse. Shidi, please, listen to me." Ngozi sat up against the headboard, one hand resting instinctively on her stomach. "I don't know why, but something about the way he touched me, it didn't feel right. I was only trying to protect our child." "Protect him from what? From my own uncle?" He turned to face her now, and his voice climbed. "This kind of disrespect must not happen again, you hear me? Whatever it is you're feeling, you keep it to yourself and you behave like a woman raised well when my family is in this house." She opened her mouth to answer, and found quite suddenly that she could not. Not because she had no words, but because a knot of pain had seized somewhere low in her belly, sharp enough to steal her breath. She pressed both hands to the spot and doubled forward with a small startled cry. "Ngozi?" Shidi's anger dropped away in an instant. "Ngozi, what is it?" "Something is wrong," she gasped. "Something is wrong with the baby." By morning the pain had a shape. It came in waves that started from her lower back and clawed round to her belly, and each wave left her weaker than the one before. Ngozi lay on the cold tiles of the bathroom because the bed had become unbearable. her knees drawn up, her nightgown soaked through with sweat. Her husband, Chitty, found her there at 4:30, and the sound she made when he lifted her was not a sound he had heard from a human being before. "Talk to me," he kept saying, as he half-carried, half-dragged her to the car. "Ngozi, talk to me." Her mouth was open, but nothing came except a thin, high keening, like something was being pulled out of her from the inside. At the hospital, the doctors ran their hands over her stomach, frowning, calling for machines, calling for more senior doctors. The baby's heartbeat, they said, kept disappearing and returning, as though something were reaching in and pinching it shut, then letting it breathe again for sport. "There's no medical reason for this," one doctor finally admitted, avoiding Chitty's eyes. "Her vitals are stable, the scans are clean, but she is in agony we cannot explain." They gave her injections that did nothing. They gave her a bed by the window, and she stared at the ceiling and whispered, over and over, "Something is squeezing my baby. Somebody is squeezing my baby." Chitty held her hand and told her to be strong. But in his own chest, a small, cold seed had begun to grow, and its shape was his uncle's face, smiling. 3 days later they discharged her, because the machines found nothing, and machines cannot treat what they cannot see. She came home smaller than she had left, her cheeks sunken, her eyes ringed with gray. She did not sleep. Whenever she closed her eyes, she said, she felt fingers on her belly, not Chitty's fingers, not her own, but old, dry fingers, patient fingers, pressing and searching for something. Chitty's mother came to stay, and she brought native herbs boiled into a bitter tea, and she brought a pastor, and she brought a diviner 2 days after that, because in that house, in that season, everyone had run out of certainty about which kind of help was the right kind. The pastor prayed over her until his voice broke. The diviner threw his cowries on the mat, studied them a long time, and would not meet anyone's eyes when he stood. "There is a hand in this," he said only. "Not a hand from outside your compound. A hand from your own blood." Chitty's mother began to weep without being asked why. The pains came differently now, no longer only in her stomach but climbing her spine, seizing her jaw, locking her hands into claws, so that Chitty had to prise her fingers open one by one, whispering her name like a man trying to wake someone from very deep water. Neighbors began to gather outside the gate in the evenings, not to gossip, but because the sound of her crying out traveled over the fence, and none of them could bring themselves to leave while it continued. She was taken to another hospital, a bigger one in the city, 4 hours away over bad road, every pothole drawing a scream out of her that left Chitty's shirt damp with his own tears by the time they arrived. That hospital found nothing too. They gave her stronger drugs. For 6 hours she slept, and Chitty sat by her bed and allowed himself, for the first time since the old man had left his uncle's smile hanging in that room, to admit what he had been refusing to think, that something had been done to his wife, and that he knew, some deep, unspoken, cowardly part of him knew exactly who had done it. He did not go to his uncle, not yet. He told himself he was afraid of being wrong. The truth was he was afraid of being right. They tried a native doctor next, a woman 3 villages from his mother's hometown, said to see what hospitals could not. She took one look at Ngozi, now barely able to sit upright, and refused to touch her. "Whoever did this used a calabash," she said flatly. "The baby's spirit has been called into a vessel and bound there. Until that calabash is broken, this woman's body will keep fighting a war it cannot win, because the child it is fighting for is no longer only here." Chitty's legs went weak beneath him. He thought of his uncle's hands resting on his wife's stomach. He thought of the wicked curl of that smile as the old man left the room, unbothered by the anger he'd caused, as if he already knew none of it would matter. "Who's Calabash?" Chitty asked, though he already knew the shape the answer would take. The old woman only shook her head. "That is not something I can hand you. That is something you must go and find with your own eyes in your own house." He did not go and find it. He went instead to beg his uncle's forgiveness, because some poison runs in the blood thicker than truth, and a nephew raised to fear his elders does not accuse them lightly, not even when his wife is dying in a hospital bed 4 hours from home. He went with kola nut and money in an envelope, and knelt in his uncle's parlor, and apologized for Ngozi's rudeness that day, for his own harsh words to her afterward, for the disrespect that had, he said, brought a curse of misfortune upon his house. His uncle received the apology with great warmth. He patted Chidi's shoulder, called him a good son, prayed a long and flowery prayer over him, and sent him home with a bottle of special water for his wife to drink, which Chidi carried back to the hospital, like a man carrying his own child's death, without knowing it. Ngozi refused to drink it. She could barely speak by then, but when the bottle touched her lips, she thrashed so violently that 2 nurses had to hold her down, and Chidi, ashamed and confused, poured it away in the sink and never told his uncle. 2 weeks became 4. The hospital moved her to a private room because her screaming disturbed the ward. Her mother came and sat by the bed and sang the songs she had sung to Ngozi as a child, low and cracked, and Ngozi's hand would sometimes twitch in time with the tune, the only sign she still knew anyone was there. Her belly, once round with life, had begun to look wrong somehow, sunken in places it should not sink, as though whatever had been growing there was being drawn out of it slowly, thread, by someone else's hand, in someone else's house. Chidi barely slept. He sat by her bed each night rehearsing questions he was too afraid to ask his uncle directly, turning the diviner's words and the native doctor's words over and over, unable to build them into a shape he could act on. He was a modern man, he told himself. He believed in doctors, and yet every night his wife screamed as though invisible hands were inside her, and every night the doctors found nothing, and every night his uncle's smile returned to him uninvited. She died on a Tuesday morning just after 5, with the whole ward pretending to be asleep so as not to intrude on the sound of Chidi's grief. There was no final struggle. She had simply stopped fighting sometime in the dark hours, her hands still curled faintly around her own stomach, as if trying, to the very last, to shield something that was no longer there. The doctors could give no cause. They wrote words on a certificate that meant nothing to anyone in that room, and they left Chidi alone with a woman who 6 weeks earlier had shouted at an old man simply for placing his hand where a hand should never have been placed. Grief made him reckless in a way fear had never allowed him to be. 3 days after the burial, unwashed, unslept, he went to his uncle's house without kola nut, without an envelope, without the softness a nephew is trained from birth to carry into an elder's parlor. He went into the old man's bedroom while his uncle was at the market, and he searched drawer by drawer, box by box, until under the bed, wrapped in a strip of red cloth, he found it. A small calabash, sealed with wax, warm to the touch, though the room was cool, and inside it, when he finally broke it open with shaking hands, nothing but a thin trickle of blood-dark water, and a single knot of black thread, already unraveling into dust. His uncle's daughter, it turned out, had lost 3 pregnancies in her husband's house over 4 barren years, and the old man, it was later whispered among relatives, who had always half known and said nothing, could not bear that another woman in the family should carry what his own child could not. He had not meant, some said in his defense, for it to take the mother too. He had only meant to stop the child. Chidi never told the police, because there was nothing to tell them that they could hold in their hands as evidence. No wound, no weapon, no poison a laboratory could name. He told the family instead at the funeral rites 40 days later, standing over his uncle's bowed head in front of everyone who had gathered, and watched the old man's face collapse from performed grief into something smaller and guiltier. Though by then no words, no confession, no curse turned back upon its owner, could return to him the only 2 lives he had wanted more than any other in this world. He kept the broken calabash. He never explained to anyone why.